Hey guys, in this video, we're gonna talk about why people don't follow you. So as a worship leader, as a tech team leader, any type of leader, but specifically in worship ministry, you've probably dealt with the frustration of why are people not showing up to rehearsal prepared? Why are people not wanting to follow me when it comes to implementing any changes in our worship ministry, implementing new tech? Why are people just showing no interest in this ministry and seeing it grow and thrive? So that's what we're going to address in this video. Why are people ultimately, why are they just not following you? So, whenever I'm teaching on these things, guys, I remember these are hard lessons that I've learned myself over 10 years of leading worship, and also now like trying to build a business. So, and doing both of those two things at the same time right now. So remember, a lot of these things that we're going to cover in this video, I'm kind of preaching to myself about them as well. They're good reminders to myself, and maybe this is going to be the first time anybody has ever told you about these concepts. So keep watching. We're going to talk about why people are not following you. So first, it's important to identify this principle. Can you read that? It's your fault. Okay, so there's this principle in leadership called extreme ownership. There's a book I listened to one time. I think it's called Extreme Ownership. It's by the Navy SEAL guys, and his name's Jocko. I can't remember what his last name is. But the idea is that as leaders, if we are in charge of something and something goes wrong, we cannot blame it on our volunteers or anybody else. It's on ourselves. So you always have to come at these things from a posture of humility and being able and willing to admit, okay, if there's a problem here, it's my fault. I can't blame anybody else. So that's the first kind of principle to make sure you grasp here. So first, after you identified and realized that, oh, then this is probably a problem in my leadership, because that's ultimately what most of these problems come down to. How do we start addressing this? So here's why I'll kind of break down the reasons why people aren't following you. So again, these are all things that I've discovered why people weren't following me when I struggle with these issues. So let's go ahead. I'll start up here. Reason number one, they don't care about your title. Reason number one, they don't care about your title. So just because you've been given the title of a worship leader at your church, nobody really cares about that. Like they're like, so you're a worship leader, you're the worship minister, you're the worship pastor, you're the worship director. Doesn't matter. Titles have very little influence over whether or not people are going to follow you or not. So first, just get over those facts. Just because you have a title doesn't mean people are going to follow you. Maybe it gives you like a little bit of clout, like a little bit of influence, because people, titles are helpful to kind of just help people identify who's in charge here. But that's about it. It's not going to get you much farther than that. So that's a really, really easy one to hopefully identify for you, that people don't care about your title. So they're probably not going to care about what you are asking or demanding of them, or trying to challenge or push them to do, if you're just relying on your title. Okay? Number two. Number two, they don't know you. So that's why people don't follow you, is they don't know you. They don't trust you. It's kind of a basic human concept. If you met a stranger on the street and they're like, "Hey, follow me," you probably wouldn't do that if you didn't know who they were and what their intentions were. We need basic level of trust in order to follow people. So if your musicians, your tech team members, if your team doesn't feel like they know who you are, they don't know anything about your passions, your hobby, what kind of makes you click, then they're just not gonna trust you. They're not gonna want to follow you. And I learned this the hard way, especially as the young guy who's come into existing worship ministries before. I failed to take the time to just get to know people. And how do you do that? You take them out to lunch, take them out to coffee, go on walks with them, just like you get to know any other friend in your life. And you don't have to be best buddies with everybody in your team, but they have to feel like they know you, in that they have to sense that you actually care about them, and you should care about them. So if you don't care about people, you don't know people, just do the actions that will help bring you to a place where you will, because sometimes the action will precede the feelings that we actually have, right? So sometimes this is what I found. Like, I go from not caring about anybody in their life, and then they actually start spending time with them, start asking them questions. So ask more questions than you're talking yourself, right? Just treat people like you're interviewing them, and you're really just wanting to hear their life story. And then generally some pretty interesting things come up. I know this happened to me quite a few times as I was getting to know some folks in my ministry, especially the ones who've been around for a while. They had lots of life experience under their belt, and they had some really fascinating stories, and that just kind of brought my level of respect for them way up. And then they could sense that, and then that brought their level of respect for me way up. So then when I wanted to introduce new things, like how to, running a click and tracks and in-ear monitoring and Ableton and automation, people weren't just caught off guard, like, who is this stranger coming in here and doing all this crazy stuff, right? They're like, oh, it's Jake, and he cares about excellence and setting us up for success, and all those things, right? So they got to hear my heart on those things before I went about doing them. So if people aren't following you, this is one of the first areas to check, is do they actually know you? Do they know you enough to actually have trust in you and the decisions that you're going to make as a leader? So that's the second reason why people aren't following you. They don't know you, okay? And then number 3. Number 3, the third reason why they're not following you is because they don't see results. So once you've kind of taken care of these two truths up here and you're addressing these, then you got to address this one. They may not be following you because they're not actually seeing productive output from you, their leader. Because people ultimately look up to other people who contribute a lot to whatever organization they're part of, right? So in a worship ministry setting, they're looking to you as the worship leader to be a very productive person. As you might feel like they're objectifying you or whatever, but that's just the truth. People want to see that you're the best musician that you possibly can be. Maybe not the best musician, period, but they want to see that you're showing up prepared, maybe even completely memorizing songs. You know your parts, the chords, lyrics, and you know how to give them clear direction. When there's an issue happening in rehearsal, something needs to be addressed, you know how to fix it, because you can produce results, music, whether that's musical excellence, as well as some of the other technical stuff that has to go on behind the scenes as for worship ministry, right? So you know how to work the sound system, you know how to fix problems with the sound system, and that's one area. And then also, you should be pushing yourself pastorally to get pastoral results, right? They want to see you engaging the congregation, kind of stepping out of your comfort zone and helping the congregation step out of their comfort zone in worship, and pushing things forward, raising the bar in terms of just the overall experience that everyone is striving for in worship, right? We want this to be a life-changing experience, and everybody's looking to you as a worship leader to help facilitate that, because obviously God is the one who makes that happen, and the Holy Spirit does whatever the Holy Spirit wants to do in worship, but God has put us as leaders in place to help lead the people and curate an environment for God to do some pretty awesome stuff. So at the end of the day, people want to see that you're helping, especially in a worship ministry, that you can get the musical results, you can get the technical results, as well as the pastoral results. And if you're not doing that, if you're showing up not prepared, if you don't know anything, if you don't take the time to actually learn things, to become an expert in these areas, not necessarily so you have to do everything yourself all the time, but you need to have the knowledge and be the expert at it. If people don't see that, they're not going to really follow you very far. You can get decently far off of these relationships up here, but at the end of the day, it's just like they'll just quickly discover like, maybe his heart's not really in this, like he doesn't really care about it, kind of like a low bar for excellence and not really pushing us, and people just won't follow you. They'll follow you to a point, but if you want them to follow you further, you gotta help actually produce some results for your worship ministry. So those are the first things, and I would address these kind of in sequential order as well. Like I would focus on the whole relationship building thing before moving down to the focusing about results. Guys like me like to skip to step number 3 a lot and neglect the relationships, so I have to remind myself to do this and then do this. And then for some of you guys, you're like, I just want to have coffee with my team members all day, but I don't care if they're playing the wrong notes in worship all the time, right? And causing a huge distraction because, God doesn't care about excellence. He only cares about the heart. Well, yeah, but don't try to pull the little spiritual cop-out card on things like that. Actually, the Bible does make it very clear that we're supposed to worship the Lord skillfully with excellence. So we can't neglect the results side of things as well. It's both and, okay? And then let's talk about the next reason why people don't follow you. The next reason why is like you're not developing or challenging them. So this is especially true up to this point. If you can do 1, 2, and 3, like steps 2 and 3 really well, you're probably going to be like the top 10% of worship leaders and worship ministries out there. Like you will be able to grow a pretty thriving and healthy ministry if you are paying attention to relationships and then also actually working hard and getting great results. But if you want to be like the top 5% of worship leaders out there, just when it comes to leadership capacity, this is what is gonna help you take it to the next level and people kind of follow you further. And the reason they would stop following you beyond this point is because you're just not developing them and not challenging them. So this is especially true of the people in your ministry who are kind of high capacity leaders but don't know it yet. They feel like that they themselves are kind of producing great results. They get lots of skill, lots of talent, but they don't really have a clear roadmap on how to move things forward. Or they feel like in the ministry they're serving under you, they kind of hit a ceiling, and they're like, oh, like I feel like I could be planning services and leading songs more, or whatever that is, fill in the blank. But so and so my worship leader is not really pushing me to do that, not giving me the opportunity to do that. So what that person's going to end up doing is leaving and going find somewhere else where there isn't as much of a ceiling and they can actually continue growing. So that's the fourth reason. If you don't develop people, they're going to end up leaving. And then also there's some other downsides to this where you're going to keep doing everything yourself. You're going to get burnt out. You're going to get tired, and you're never going to create the margin in your ministry and life to be able to push yourself and to keep kind of raising your own creative capacity, because maybe you want to get out of the weeds of the weekly planning process so you can work on songwriting or just planning that night of worship or any other kind of higher level project that requires more of your time and energy. You can only do that if you have other people you're developing who can take ownership of some of these other things. So that's the fourth reason why people are not following you, or they follow you to a point and then they end up leaving, is because you're not developing them and you are not challenging them. So hopefully you've gotten some ideas of how to address these things. Let's go ahead and erase this. And I do want you guys to check out a book. This is one I recommend all the time. If you've been following me for any time at all, you've probably heard me talk about the book called The 5 Levels of Leadership. It's by John Maxwell, the leadership guru guy. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so he walks you through this process. So just buy the book, read the book. It's short, and then read it next year, and then read it the year after. I feel like this is stuff I keep coming back to and have to get reminded of. But this is a way to basically, the reasons why people don't follow you, I kind of just flipped his 5 levels of leadership so you can kind of understand this from the negative perspective. But here, the positive perspective, he talks about, level 1 is title, right? But people aren't going to follow you very far there. Level 2 is permission. This is where you develop relationships with people and you get their permission to lead them. So that's that relationship thing. Level 3 is production. So that the idea of like, you got to be a high producing leader, people will follow you further. And then level 4, you got to start developing other people on your team. It's really going to allow them to flourish as well as allow you to do some higher level stuff. And then finally, the pinnacle is like when you get to a point where you are developing people who develop other people, leaders who lead leaders. So like I know a couple guys like this, who they're like, they've been doing this leadership thing for a long time, and now they're like, they have to be selective on who they even have time to mentor. And like I even heard like one person I know, like I really respect this guy a lot. He founded a really big church in our area, and now he's basically like, I only have the time to dedicate to mentoring leaders who are leading something, like campus pastors or pastors in general, right? Like he can't, some Joe Blow off the street, he's not going to open up time in his calendar to mentor that person. So that's when you kind of reach the pinnacle of leadership, when you're leading people who then in turn are leading like people who like have a pretty big influence themselves. So some of these things though, they translate really easy to worship ministry, right? So you've got the title thing, don't rely on that. Start developing relationships, start producing results, and start developing other worship leaders. I feel like if you're at least spending time in these first 4 levels, like you're gonna be in like the top 2% of worship leaders who are pushing themselves when it comes to their leadership capacity. So that's it. I would say my call to action for you guys is to go ahead and buy the book, The 5 Levels of Leadership by John Maxwell. Read it over and over again. It's gonna change your life. I wish I read this a long time ago. It's probably some leadership books I feel like are so ethereal, and some of the principles they get into, it's just not very clear, easy to follow. But this one is super practical. So go read that book. And if you want to reach out to my team and work with us, we are trying to help push worship leaders up this kind of 5 levels of leadership through our coaching programs, our training programs. So I'll put a link below. You can apply to work with us, and maybe we'll talk soon. So hope you guys found this video helpful. Smash that like button if you did, and just keep up the great work. Keep working on developing yourself, and I think God's gonna do some awesome things through you and your ministry.